women, especially within South Asian communities, obedience, self-sacrifice, and silence are woven into our understanding of what it means to be good daughters, good wives, good mothers. Choosing to question those expectations, to trust your inner knowing, and to move in alignment with your truth is not just a personal act of healing. It can ripple outward, shifting generational narratives. This excerpt is from a memoir, The Lies We Carry and the Truths They Bury, authored by Chanchal Garg. Today, Chanchal has joined me to share her journey through intergenerational cultural conflict, spiritual and sexual abuse, and the many ways patriarchy tried to silence her. This is your host, Nandini Ray, and you are listening to the Maitri podcast, Between Friends, Conversations with Maitri. Before we start our conversation, let me introduce Chanchal. Chanchal Garg is a speaker, author, and an executive coach. For over 8 years, Chanchal has facilitated a course on interpersonal dynamics at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Thank you so much, Chanchal, for coming to our show.
Thank you so much for having me, Nandini. I'm really happy to be here.
Chanchal, your book, Unearthed, is just a powerful title. What does the word unearthed mean to you personally? And what were some of the first lies you felt needed unearthing in your own life?
So unearthed to me means to bring the truth to light. It means to excavate what has been buried. And for me, that's excavating hidden stories, narratives, pain, and things that perhaps don't even belong to me. So for instance, when I was younger, I used to believe that obedience meant love and belonging, or that my silence was sort of my path to loyalty, whether it was to my culture, to my heritage, to my religion. And those things were very harmful, as you know, they sort of led to my spiritual and sexual abuse. And because of that silence, I wasn't able to find myself. I wasn't able to find my own sense of self. And so those narratives needed to be sort of unearthed, as I say. And I think a lot of times, just in the name of saving face within our culture, those narratives are passed down often, I'm guessing, unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. Many of us grow up carrying unspoken hopes, traditions, and expectations passed down through generations after generations. And sometimes they guide us, and sometimes they feel heavy, especially when they collide with the world we are living in today.
Absolutely.
And intergenerational cultural conflict can be difficult to name, let alone confront. So, Chanchal, I would love to hear from you. What were some early moments in your life when you began to feel the weight of those inherited cultural expectations?
Yeah, so in my book, I talk about, one of those moments, I want to say I was maybe 13, 14 years old, and we had just started following this spiritual teacher. And he was from a different part of India than I was from. And so there was a member of that community who said, "Oh, I can teach you the language." And this person owned a hotel. And so my father was very willing and said, "Okay, well, I'll drop you off and you can, spend a few hours with this, quote unquote uncle, and he can teach you and then I'll pick you up." And so my father dropped me off. And during that time, this man, he pulled me onto his lap. He tried to tickle me. He did all these things, and it just felt very, very uncomfortable, as you can imagine. And so when my father came to pick me up, I rushed him out the door and I said, I told him what had happened. And his words back to me were, Beta, he was just being loving. He didn't mean anything by it. And so that moment, the first narrative that I started to learn was that, my discomfort is not as important as someone else's intentions or as someone else's comfort. Right? And so in that moment, I recognized, okay, well, if and at the same time, there's this narrative that we get, especially as girls, that you have to be pure. Don't let anybody touch your body. Your
Mm.
purity, your body is a temple. So I was getting all of these messages. And at the same time, when I spoke up, the adults in my life weren't there to help me preserve this purity. And so it became very, very confusing. And it became a point where I realized that if I speak up, number one, I look like a fool. Number two, you sort of get that a little bit of that disgrace. You feel embarrassed because these things are hard to talk about anyway.
Mm.
Um, and it doesn't matter anyway. So why speak up?
But at least you tried. At least
I
you
did.
tried to protest. You spoke up. Sometimes I feel that in our community, many parents, they or family members, they need to pay attention when their children are saying that they are not comfortable and with someone's act. But I don't know, maybe it's our culture. Sometimes we don't pay attention to our children and we kind of pay attention what adults are saying. So that needs to change. And you not only protested or spoke up about your uncomfortableness when you felt any with any adults, but also you stood up against a sexual for your sexual abuse against a leader, a faith leader. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Speaking out against a faith leader often means risking social exile. People will not even think that you are sharing truth. So how
Right.
did your community respond when you began to speak your truth, and how did you cope with that response?
So, as you know, in the book, the first time that I spoke out, I was silenced pretty quickly because it was in the presence of this so-called guru. And, my then husband went to him to try to ask him about it, and he got very angry, which was very out of character. And nobody else had even heard the conversation, but they all sort of came back to me saying, "What did you do to make this man so mad?" And
Mm,
so, obviously this man has millions of followers. And so I'm not gonna keep going. So it was another 10 years after that, before I spoke up again. And when I did, it was first to my parents who didn't really understand. And then it was to my husband who at the time blamed me for being unloyal.
mm.
And at that point, I didn't really speak up to many more people. It was really a process that I went through by myself for a while.
Yeah, if your family members are not believing you, how can you be, assured that other people will believe you, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so I had to extricate myself from that community on my own. It was very scary because all of the coping tools that I had received had been from this guru, from this faith, from this culture that I was now trying to distance myself with. I mean, I'm grateful now today that I can go back to my culture and my heritage on my own terms. But when I first had that realization, because there was no support around me, I wanted to distance myself from the culture, from the religion, from that community as far as I could. And
Mm.
so it was a very lonely path. It was a
Yeah.
very lonely path. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that if you are suffering and no one is believing you, and you have to prove yourself over and over, or you are not, you are receiving judgment, then it is hard, and I don't know how to end this kind of culture. We always do victim blaming. We always do judge people, but
Mhm.
we don't even think that how painful it is for someone to share their pain, with someone or publicly. Finding the courage to move from silence to into speech is never easy,
Right.
especially for survivors of sexual abuse and spiritual abuse. And healing is one part of the journey, but choosing to share your story openly takes another kind of strength, because you are facing so many roadblocks, so many challenges that you are seeing that people are not believing you, but still you didn't give up. So I would love to ask you that what helped you reach a place where you were ready not just to heal but also to speak, also to share your story with others. And what inner shifts or external moments helped you to share your truth publicly?
Yeah, it was a lot of different things, Nandini. Honestly, I think the first thing was, I had a yoga studio for over 6 years. And during that process, the physical practice of yoga, I started to learn to listen to my own body because for all those years, when I tried to speak up about my own discomfort, I was sort of silenced. And so the message that I had unconsciously internalized was that my body's messages don't matter.
Mm,
And so through the physical practice of yoga, the way that I was practicing, I couldn't ignore those messages anymore. So that was one.
mm,
The second was when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had to look at myself in the mirror and I had to ask myself, what is the life that I want for her? And as I did that, I also had to almost look backwards and look at the women in my lineage, in my ancestry. And as I looked backward, I realized that they could not even acknowledge their own existence,
mm,
right? They were constantly basing their own existence off of someone else's comfort. And I did not want that for her. And so at that point, I realized I needed to do something to break the cycle. And so when I first started writing, I don't know that I had an intention to publish when I first started writing, to be honest. It
mm,
was really more for myself and for my children. I wanted them to know my story. I did not want this to be in hiding. And then as an executive coach and facilitator, a lot of women of color, daughters of immigrants, especially South Asian women, tend to gravitate towards my services. And as I coach these women leaders, what I have noticed is that the same narratives that I have had to unearth are showing up for them in their leadership. So
mm,
my story is very extreme, right? It's spiritual sexual abuse and it's extreme and it's also common. I don't want to minimize that. But the way that it was showing up for them is to shrink their voice, to try to get their message through almost manipulative means because they know they're not going to be heard,
mm,
not speak up when they need to. So all of these narratives were still showing up. And I said, if we don't speak up more and share our stories, then our society is not going to realize how commonplace this is, and nothing's
mm,
going to change. And so my goal in sharing my story is number one, obviously my own family to change these generational patterns. And number two, it's to let others know out in the community that you're not alone and that there are ways to move past this. It's not easy, but there are ways to do that. And especially if we join together in a community and do it, we can make a difference.
mm. Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad that you you published your memoir because many victims they will get courage and they will get a path probably to share their stories with others. And many parents, family members, community members, probably they will see their mistakes, what they need to do to change the culture. So I'm glad that you published, and I would actually love to know from you that for parents and community members who believe that holding on to strict cultural or gender expectations is a way of protecting or preserving values. What would you say to them, especially about the long-term impact this can have on their children's emotional and spiritual well-being?
Yes. So the first thing I'll address is sort of the cultural norm around respect for elders. I'm not opposed to respect for elders, but I do think that respect is earned. It's not a birthright. And
Mm,
so if there's an elder who is abusing their power, they do not deserve respect. And if we're going to sort of gaslight ourselves into believing that they do, then that's only going to cause harm. I mean, that's exactly what my story was with this man who was abusing me, right? He was
Mm,
older to me, and therefore his intentions, and he was just trying to be loving, and therefore it didn't matter. So when we start to do that, then children start to question themselves, and they stop having that inner compass that is
mm,
going to guide them and keep them safe beyond the years that they're in their parents' home. So that's one. You never want your child to lose their no. It's so important for a child to be able to say no.
mm,
So that's one. The gender expectations, you know, it's so true. This is not a world that is safe for women and girls. But let's stop putting that on them and be honest about the male gaze, right?
mm,
Let's be honest about why is it unsafe? How do you protect yourself? Rather than just saying, if you wear that, you're not a good girl, or if you do this, you're not a good girl, because it's really not about the girls.
mm,
The lack of safety isn't because of the girls, it's because of the men,
mm,
right? So can we say what it is rather than blaming women? Because otherwise, women and girls, they're growing up with this burden of shame that doesn't belong to them. And
yeah.
that burden of shame keeps them small in their families, in their in-laws' house, in their communities, with their children, at work, everywhere they go.
Yeah, and again, it comes to victim blaming that if you are raped, then it is your fault.
Right.
If you are abused by your partner, then it is your fault. Most of the time, we see that victims they don't get support they deserve. They always get blaming. That is, it's your fault. What can you do to protect yourself? This is the high time we shift out the narrative that what can community do to change the perspective where victims are not heard.
And I would even ask the question, why? Why is community so afraid to contribute to the protection of these women?
Mm,
What is that? What is that about?
yeah,
I
yeah,
think we all need to ask that question.
yeah. Whenever we see that someone has power and they have right to control, so that power and control dynamic is maybe people are not. I don't know. It's very frustrating. I know it's very frustrating, and but still, I hope people like you who are continuously talking about this issue and raising awareness, and probably we will see a different day tomorrow. But it's a long way to go.
Yeah.
So, do you have any suggestion that how does one give their daughter, her freedom while still upholding the traditions that sustain stable families and close knit community? Because I see that misconception in community that if we are giving freedom to our daughters, then it will be a disaster.
I guess the first step for me is questioning, why do you think that? Right? You look at our culture and our religion, and we have these extremely powerful goddesses, Durga, Lakshmi, Kali Mata, and they are not weak, and
Mm,
they're also very independent if you look at them. And so why is it that and yet we call our daughters Lakshmi, but now we're thinking that if we give them freedom, that something bad, like it's such a hypocritical statement if you think about it.
mm,
And so I think we have to educate our daughters. We have to empower our daughters. We have to tell them the truth, and then
mm,
we have to trust them. And the thing that I have seen with my own children is that when I am honest with them, and when I am willing to have open conversations with them, and I'm not expecting them to trust people just because they're older or just because they hold some sort of power, that trust builds both ways. They now trust me and I trust them. So if, for instance, my daughter wants to go somewhere and I look at that place and I say, okay, that doesn't seem safe to me. And I go to my daughter and I say, hey, listen, this doesn't seem safe because of this, this, and this. She now trusts me. It's not an argument anymore,
mm. Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm seeing changes, taking place. People are they have open communication and trust building with their children. But still, on the other hand, I'm also seeing that in our work, we're also seeing that victim blaming is happening and gender inequality gender abuse is still there, shouldn't be there, but still there. Yeah, we need to do a lot of conversation, activism.
Yeah. I also think that this idea of victim blaming is really, I think as humans, we have this desire for safety, right?
Mm,
And if we're victim blaming, then we're basically saying, because you did this, that happened to you, right?
mm,
And when someone says that, they're creating protection for themselves by saying, well, if I don't do what you did, then I'm
mm.
safe.
Yeah,
They're creating this false narrative in their mind. And then all of a sudden, one day, something happens within their own family, and that narrative gets broken. But it's very easy to do that. It's very comfortable to do that, to place the blame there and to create this illusion of safety for yourself. But it's
mm,
not the reality,
yeah,
right? So if when there is this urge to blame a victim, again, I mean, it takes a willingness to reflect. And I think this is so evident in our Indian culture, like we have such a rich archive of philosophy, but yet the ability to reflect, to truly reflect, is so small within our
mm,
communities. It's really mind-boggling. I think there's such a feeling of sort of entitlement or hierarchy that it covers up the ability to reflect. And until we can reflect and ask ourselves the hard questions, I don't think anything is going to change. And it
yeah.
takes courage to do that.
Yeah, it takes courage to do that. It takes courage when people, if you're when you are sharing your pain with someone and they judge you or they don't listen to you or they just start victim blaming. What did you do? Why did you provoke? Something like that. Like the when you talked about that spiritual guru and people started asking you what did you do to make
Right.
him so angry, or when you spoke about your the abuse by your a man from your community to your dad, and he also kind of didn't take it seriously. So
Yeah.
that is the what does that mean, that we are not taking victims and survivors seriously? So
Mhm.
that needs to change. That needs to change.
Yes.
I'm not saying that it is not happening in our community. Yes, it is
Right.
happening. People are talking about it. People are raising awareness. People are standing up against this kind of injustice. But everyone should do it. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the thing. So if I'm asking you that, what one message would you want to give to someone who feels silenced by family, faith, and community, and is afraid to speak the truth?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is I would want that person to know that their truth is sacred. Even if nobody else validates it, it's still sacred. And you're not alone. What's happened to you or what is happening to you is not your fault. And if you can start with baby steps in terms of acts of courage, right? Maybe the first step is to write it down on a piece of paper, right? Even if you burn it afterwards.
Mm,
Maybe you find one person to disclose even just a small thing to. You know, Maitri is such a wonderful organization. If you are able to reach out for support, know that you're not alone. You're not the first person to go through this. There is support out there. And you speaking up and trying to heal from abuse is not a betrayal to the culture. It's an evolution of the culture. It's what's needed for our culture. It's
mm,
an act of love for yourself. It's an act of love for future generations. And I would say it's an act of love for our culture, because
mm.
otherwise, this is such a dark shadow that really needs to come to light.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Chanchal, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your courage and your story with us with such honesty. And in this conversation, we have unearthed so many layers of inherited expectations, cultural silence, and the heavy cost of speaking against injustice, but also of resilience, healing, and truth telling. So thank you for being part of this dialogue with us.
It's my pleasure, Nandini. Thank you so much for having me and for all the work that Maitri is doing. It's really needed.
Yeah, we need community with us, like survivors, victims, and advocates. They cannot do alone this kind of mammoth work. We need the entire community to understand that harmful patriarchal norms and culture there is no need to carry those culture if
Right.
they are causing harm. And this kind of conversation what we are having on our platform, and everywhere you are giving speeches everywhere. I see that on your social media, on your email. I get that news. I'm so happy that you are raising awareness. You are supporting so many survivors who are getting courage, receiving courage and hope from your book, from your speeches. So I thank you a lot.
Mm. Thank you so much, Nandini. That it really does mean the world to me. It's my hope. So yeah, I hope this message gets out. I hope we can create some change. I hope more and more people join the movement. And we can make a difference because we have, our culture is so beautiful. We have so much to share. And
Yeah.
this is sort of a handicap right now. So
Yes.
yeah,
And always, collective force can do a magic, right?
absolutely.
So, listeners, we invite you to carry these stories into your own communities. Talk with your children, your friends, your faith circles, and challenge the cultural and gender expectations that cause harm. Every small act of listening, questioning, and supporting survivors help build a culture where everyone is safe and valued. Together, we can unearth not just the pain of silence, but also the possibility of change. This is your host Nandini Ray signing off today. I will come back soon with another meaningful discussion. Please keep listening to our podcast Between Friends Conversations with Maitri. Find all our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and SoundCloud. To learn about our services, please visit our website maitri.org and follow Maitri Bay Area on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and attend our events and support us. Thank you.
This show is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as legal advice. Always consult an attorney for legal advice. Views expressed by guests of the radio show are individual opinions and not endorsed by Maitri.
Maitri is a free, confidential, non-profit organization based in the San Francisco Bay Area that helps families and individuals facing domestic violence. Don't suffer in silence. Call Maitri Helpline 1-888-8 Maitri. Visit our website maitri.org.